All right, we're here with AJ Baker representing Whoop. It's not the Whoop or the Whoop company, it's just Whoop, correct?
Just Whoop.
It's
Incorporated is the technical name.
it's kind of like Beastie Boys. Everybody says the Beastie Boys, but it's Beastie Boys, just for those listening.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited to talk to you. I've had my Whoop now over probably about 6 weeks. I saw you in Wadapalooza, so it's been about that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got somewhat bad news. I'm only 65% recovered today, so I don't know how strong this interview is going to be.
Hey,
So
65 isn't so bad. Could be worse. It could be worse.
I've had lower.
I've actually had the elusive green week. I just got there today, where you get 7 straight recoveries.
What is that? Seven straight what?
Green recoveries. It's the first time I've done that in ever. So
Is
that's
that this screen?
that's that screen. Yep.
Okay.
So I just got my 7th straight, which took me only 4 years to actually get, and being completely isolated from the rest of the world to actually do it. So that's the circumstance, I guess. But feeling good, happy to be here.
Well, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. I'm a big proponent of Whoop. I my friends and family ask about it. I use it every day, and I will say when I first got it, I was kind of like informally using it, and part of it was I trained a lot of jiu-jitsu, and I found it hard to use the Whoop or while training jiu-jitsu. But now since we've been home, I've only been either doing CrossFit, strength training, cardio, etc. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that I've seen new activities pop up in the activity tracker over the last few weeks.
It's very possible. We've tended to just about, probably every quarter we've probably added at least 1 or 2 in there. For a while we had a ton of coaches who were wearing Whoop, realizing that the 3 hours a day they'd spend running classes or something like that would ultimately be more strenuous on their body than the 30-minute workout they did. So we added coaching as an activity. Some people are big public transportation commuters, riding bikes to and from work, sprinting across the subway platforms. So we've added commuting in there as well. You'll see more and more stuff pop in there, and being as descriptive as we can in that activity section is important, so people really understand which activities affect them differently.
Yeah, I mean, you have gaming in there now. You have ice baths, you have Pilates, so certainly
Yep.
expanded. And I want to treat this kind of interview as me understanding it more, so then people
Sure.
that currently have it can understand it more, or those interested in it. So let's stay on the top. Actually, I'm gonna go screen by screen if you don't mind. So
Let's do it.
yeah, I mean, so you open up your Whoop. If you're used to it, obviously you've attached it. It's synced. You set it to your wrist, etc. And you have your home screen, which is just kind of the basics about you. And I love the fact that you can swipe across, and then basically if you swipe down or up, whichever it is, you kind of get more detailed information on that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the first thing you do is swipe right, and you're kind of at your day's activities. So going along that, what you and I were just talking about, my first question there would be, how important is it for you to quantify your activity? So, for example, I don't ever set the fact that I'm going to sleep, but it picks it up. But when I first started using it, it didn't always pick up what I was doing. And weightlifting, yoga, things where my heart rate wasn't getting really jacked up, I would assume.
Yeah, and that's exactly the case, right? So, I mean, not initially, but in general, Whoop is much more of a cardiovascular intense device, right? The strains you're going to be putting up, if you are really based a lot on the duration of time you're spending in certain max heart rate zones. Most of the calculation comes from that, along with some intensity factors, as well as the environment, right? So, activities more than anything is for your own benefit to see which ones actually affect you, physiologically, right? And primarily cardiovascularly. So we're never going to be able to do something like neuromuscular fatigue or really track the type of soreness your muscles might have, right? But if you go out and do a 1-rep max deadlift, that's going to shock your central nervous system, just about more than any other activity you can do. So you'll see a low strain score because, it's not a super long exercise or, even one that's going to get your heart rate up for a very long time. maybe there's 1 or 2 sets where you're kind of building to max, then doing the max effort rep. But the following day, your CNS will be shocked and that recovery score will be lower, right? So what you want to be able to look back on is, okay, well, what activity, let's say you wake up with that 65% recovery. It's like, what activities actually do I know I do that'll get me to, the 12 to 14 range, which is kind of like the recommended area for my specific strength load today.
How did you know that?
Is that I mean, think about it. Right? You look at that overview screen, that main page, those 2 dials at the top, those 2 circles,
Yep.
that recovery, 65% is going to fill that thing up 65% of the way. The strain score has another one wrapping right around it. And the idea is that you can pair the level of stress your body takes on with the recovery you have, right? So that way you're taking basically as much load as your body can handle every single day, right? You're never falling into these overtraining or undertraining sections of a training cycle, right? Where if you're just pushing yourself beyond what your body can handle, you're going to be more susceptible to injury. Your technique's going to fall apart because of fatigue. That's where things like soft tissue injuries happen. And then from there, it extends even down to like things like adrenal fatigue or rhabdo, which are super popular in CrossFit, comparatively to other sports. So really understanding recovery is the first, but, as it relates to marking activities down, it's designed so that you understand which of these activities, especially over a long period of time, affect your bodies in which ways. If all right, I got a low recovery today. I know yoga is going to yield a lower strain, probably good for me. It's an active recovery day. Let's just do that, right? If you wake up, it's like, hey, I'm surprisingly 25%. I'm going to go, try to run a 5K because I know that, cardiovascularly that beats the crap out of me, right? So more than anything, they're designed to quantify we're built to, kind of mark all these things down, give you as much information as possible into which behaviors affect you in which ways. So that way, as you continue to move forward, you have some type of platform and some type of data to look back on that you can then action and, kind of improve forward to.
So interesting. I think I've realized for the first time that blue outer ring 20 is probably the cap.
21. Yep.
21. So that makes sense that you knew, hey, if you're at 65% recovery, you should be about a 12 strain.
I got a few years with this product. Yeah.
No, but that's for me, and I hope for the listeners that's important. And I want to be clear. So what you're basically saying is if you don't ever set your activity, your strain should still be tracked for the day. You just wouldn't know. Because here's something I've learned big time during this quarantine. Walking jacks my strain up.
Believe it or not, walking is one of those things that people never really understand what it does to you, right? Walking is one of the few things that really just kind of releases all the endorphins in your brain and gets changes your serotonin levels, right? It's like a moving meditation essentially, right? So you walk, your heart rate will come up. If you're talking to somebody or engaging with other people, an average walking heart rate is somewhere between 85 and 100 for the most part. If you add in talking and you add conversation to that, it can get all the way up to 115. You do that for 45 minutes, 45 minutes at 115 isn't nothing. So like that's the kind of thing that, especially for fitter people, walking is something you don't really think about as an exercise. But as soon as you start to do it and you see it, especially in circumstances like the ones we have today, it really does start to add something to your strain scores. So more than anything, it's going to give you a holistic view and show you exactly what it does.
It's surprising. There are days where I'll walk and then hit a CrossFit-esque workout in my extra bedroom, and it's like the CrossFit workout gave me a 6, and I'm going for long walks, but it'll hit like a 12, on a 2-hour walk. So let's continue on that screen. We have our daily activities. If you swipe down, you have your kind of what it would appear to be what your weekly recovery looks like in comparison to your weekly strain. And obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, maybe I should ask you this, how often is it okay for your strain to be higher than your recovery?
I think there's 2 factors in that, right? One, it's dependent on your body and your body's ability to manage extra, additional load that's going on, right? So if you're consistently, in the red and you're consistently outworking yourself, that's probably a good thing. That just says like, hey, pull back the reins a little bit. You're setting yourself up for injury here. Or, for other issues, there's possibility for all sorts of things when your body's not recovering, you're continuing to push through. If you're able to maintain, if you're, let's say you have, we'll use the 60% recovery again, but let's say you have that 65%. If you get a 65% recovery every single day and your body's still able to, and you're still putting on, 15 to 17 and sometimes 19 strength scores, right? That all that says to me is that you're pushing yourself, right? You're working really hard, but your body's not totally under recovering from it, right? Every now and then you're going to want the eye just so you can get back into the green and see that your body's reacting positively. But it's all about what you're really trying to do. So I think there's two factors, right? Number one is what is capable of handling. If you can handle, if you're seeing it in your data there that you're not totally under recovery, falling into those red zones or the low yellow, and you're still kind of outreaching your strain score is kind of outpacing your recovery score, that's fine, as long as you're not putting yourself in a spot where you can't continue to handle that, right? As long as you're not getting multiple and low recovery. The
Well,
other part is
because,
dependent on what you're.
well, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're basically saying is if you weren't recovering at all, your recovery would continue to trend down. But if you're
Correct.
sustaining
Yeah.
that 65%, you're saying, hey, you're straining yourself, but your body's clearly still able to recover two-thirds.
Yep. You're putting a lot of stress on your body, but you're not under recovery. That's the biggest key there, right? And then the second piece would be, what is your training like right now? Training for the CrossFit, and you have, it's what month are we in? We're in May and they're in August still. The season schedule hasn't changed or anything like that. If you're in May, you probably are trying to still make a few last gains right now. You're trying to get a little bit better. So you might want to stress yourself in a positive way. You're going to want to set a new standard for how much load you can take on. So putting yourself, beyond, right? Pushing yourself beyond the limit of your recovery, just so you can kind of see how far you can go. You'll probably end up in that red space for a day or two, then rebound, right? If you want to add that positive stress, more than anything, what we're just going to tell you is when you're stressing yourself too far beyond, right? So so often people will stick to a training that says, all right, in 4 weeks, we're going to do this, right? At 4 weeks, you should be at this place. And, in weeks 2 and 3, sometimes people fall into this space where their body's just kind of not feeling great. They're trying to hit higher weights. You end up plateauing, right? Why is that? It's because you're trying to continue to add this positive stress when your body's not capable of taking it on. So 2 things to talk about is what's the deal with, overreaching beyond your recovery score on a consistent basis. 1, how is your body responding to it? And then 2, what are you actually training for, right? If you're trying to get better and trying to set a new standard, it's okay to overreach. You're going to have a functional overreaching period for a little while, right? You just want to make sure that you don't do it too much so that you end up injured and back to square one, right? Versus, and then the other part of that, if you can sustain it, do it, keep going.
Well, I think this has been a really good time for me to use this because it is a scary time out there. We're worried about our immune systems. So I look at this and I'm like, all right, whether or not I should push hard today based on my recovery, because I know after pushing too hard, and not for a day, but if you continue that for too long, it's going to break down your body, but also your immune system. And here's,
Totally.
we're living in a time where we
Totally.
don't want that. So one of the main pieces of feedback I hear from people, and I'm sure you've heard this, is they don't want the Whoop to dictate how they're feeling when they're feeling okay. Does that make So it's like, well, man, my recovery is showing me 30%, but I feel great. And you don't want that to impact what goes on at the gym. Or the opposite. My recoveries, I had a couple of days recently where I'm at like 95%. And I'm like, well, I should push hard.
Should it be this way? Sure, yeah.
So what would you say to those people?
I think there's multiple ways to think about it. And I think it's 2 prongs, right? First of all is when you see a recovery score that you don't really understand, start to think about the other questions, the other factors that really go into that. HRV in particular is a really sensitive metric. It's responsive to, the fun phone call that we're going to have right now. It's responsible to the healthy meal you had for lunch, and it's responsible to the tough meeting you had with your boss, right? Like all of those things are going to have an impact on the way that your body functions, specifically through the lens of HRV and in your nervous system. So when you get to certain spots where you kind of wake up and it's like, okay, I feel like I feel like I'm having a good day, but my Whoop is telling me 35%. What are the other things I did? How did I eat? What's my stress level been like? Have I been traveling recently? What supplements have I been using? And a big reason for the Whoop journal, that feature we just put out back in March, is really designed so you can help refine those behaviors and really understand what does have an impact on my recovery on a day-to-day basis, what impacts it positively, what impacts it negatively, right? Because there are so many other factors that go into training, in the best possible ways, that aren't in the gym, right? So what do we say to people who are kind of bummed out or sometimes confused by their, or okay, think about the other factors that go into it. And then two, it's not necessarily a prescription for how you're going to perform. One of my coworkers actually ran the Chicago Marathon, 30% recovery, and did it pretty well. But at the end of that, she was beat to crap. She was toast and had multiple days where she had to sit back and take off just to recover from it. Like, a marathon will do that to you because it's a max effort type of thing. But the other side of it is it's not a prescription for how you're going to perform. So if you feel like I get a 30% recovery, really wanted to go get a tough day in the gym, be smart about it. Don't go try to set your PR because that's you're probably not going to get it. But then two, just be mindful of how much more additional recovery steps you might have to take afterward. So it's not a prescription for the day necessarily, but it's without a doubt a valuable data point for when you think about the overall here, right? How do you want to feel on Friday? If you wake up on Monday with a shitty recovery and you want to go out and push it, that's your call. Just know that in order to sustain any of this, you have to put more time into the recovery side of things.
Well, and that's one thing I've learned too. I think the longer you use it, the more it gets acclimated to your body.
Totally.
And, I realized, man, I was like, I got a great night's, this is maybe last week, I got a great night's sleep. Why is my recovery so low? And it went a little easier. And then all of a sudden I had like 3 days in the 90s. So you realize, okay, it's kind of like your nutrition. It's like, it's not always what you ate yesterday, but it's what did you eat last week and the week before that.
Totally.
Yeah,
there's absolutely a cumulative effect like that. I think there's everything's connected in one way or another. Any system you get into is going to have, if you affect one piece of it, a lot of the other things get affected as well, right? So, when we start with sleep, we prioritize good sleep. That usually lends itself to other good habits, right? Like not eating too late because it affect the way your sleep happens, right? Or, in some cases it's trying different sleep supplements or, even changing a diet or drinking more water, but all of the things do play a role. That's why I think, when you see a low recovery, really ask yourself the questions as to what you did over the past 2 weeks. Have you, how is your lifestyle responding to it is really what you're seeing. How is your body that lifestyle that's a manifestation of.
One thing you mentioned, and the last thing about this screen is you mentioned the journal. It's accessible from this screen with that little clipboard and pencil. And
yep.
I've noticed that journals become even more extensive. And one thing I've realized is you can adjust that journal. I didn't know it at first. I was like, this is a silly question. Why does it ask me this every night? So, I only have mine set currently for caffeine, a device in bed, and a shared bed, which is 99% of the time, yes, yes, yes. How valuable is it to have more questions there? And then the second tier to that would be, does marijuana count towards sleep medication? Because if so, I've been answering it incorrectly every day.
Hey, that's a personal preference question right there.
There should be, well, let me throw it out there. There should be you should have, did you take an edible?
Hey, yeah, why not? And that can be one of the notes you add in yourself, right?
Send that to the higher ups. So, but how important are all the, and again, you have the COVID, the injured, the sick, which are kind of just yes, no questions. But I got rid of like the reading one, which I believe was standard because I'm typically reading on a Kindle, a device. So it's like right there.
Yep.
So how important are those? And if I answered none of them, would it impact my scores?
None of it would impact your scores. All of the calculation that you'll see in things like recovery, strain, sleep for that matter, those are all our base, the basis of Whoop. Those are calculated on the objective we have. Stuff that you fill out after the fact, like the surveys, for example, after a workout, and the journal as well, those are all a matter of preference, right? If you feel like you're doing some self-experimentation and you really want to get into, okay, so I'm trying CBD. I want to know what that actually does to me, and does it correlate in a positive or negative way? Which impact does it have? Then you want to start to fill those things. For me, I have been around with CBD oils, right? Both the topical and the I actually got one right here, stuff too, right? Shout out to Beam. But that stuff, right? Like, so I have been playing around with it to see what type of impact it does have on sleep. And every month you'll get a report as part of your monthly report from Whoop. All of your journal questions will be factored into it, right? So like something like, for me right now, we'll use CBD as the example. because I've started using CBD, how much impact does that have on the quality of my sleep, the quality of my recovery, things like that. What I really want to know is what impact does it actually play, right? You can kind of see when you're, playing around with it yourself. Like I know that, I typically end up getting more slow wave sleep when I use CBD oil. Is that a fact? Probably not. Is it something I can attribute to it? We'll see. But at the end of the month, I'll get some more information there. And then if you change diets, stuff like that really does have an impact, and that's where it becomes incredibly valuable. So it really depends on how much granularity you're looking for, how much you're trying to fine tune, and more than anything, how much you are unaware currently, right? Like if Jason, if you're like, I already know what I have going on. I know these 4 things already that I'm going to be doing. So if you fill out your standard yeses, but you want to add more and try something different, that's the other thing the journal's really, really valuable for, right?
That's super helpful. And now that you mention it like that, that brings a lot more insight, and it is good for people listening. Like you say, like people are always like, that's a great example, like CBD. How does that affect you? Well, I can tell you what it does to me, but ultimately you have to test it.
Exactly.
And see how, or add, like you said, you can add a question like, I'm doing the carnivore diet this month, and then did you eat only meat today? And then boom, we can look back in a month and say, wow, you did sleep better, or you actually slept worse.
And in so many cases too, like these things, especially like a diet change, it does kind of take a few weeks or a full month to really see the impact of it, right? To see that change data, because there are going to be fluctuations on every single day for every single person. But if you do stick to a new diet for an entire month, you will have concrete information that comes back to you from Whoop, from that journal feature, that tell you exactly what the impact was.
So if we slide over to the next screen, we just basically see your day strain with your activities listed. Like today, I don't have any activities so far. It's telling me.
Oh man.
What's that? Not yet.
I said, oh man.
So I'll get something in, but you can see it's telling me the strain that my body's primed for, moderate today, like you said, around 12. And then if you swipe down, now we see kind of the trend over the course of the week of your day strain, your average heart rate, and your caloric expenditure. Now, for the caloric expenditure, is that taking into account what your body is probably naturally burning, or is that only based on your activities?
Both. I mean, in most cases, wearable products like Whoop and in like Apple Watch, Garmin, anything, right? We're all using a similar type of algorithm that's going to be taking in your active calories, which is the calories you burn for exercise, as well as your resting calories, which is calories burned just from being alive, right? So because we are a 24/7 product, we're going to be sampling your heart rate, your nervous system activity through HRV, all of your motion in the environment around you. We're going to be looking at those things 24/7. So just when you wake up in the morning, because a day of Whoops starts when you go to sleep. Like, so you'll go to sleep, you'll get the recovery score, and then you'll already have, number of calories burned, like probably a few hundred calories burned for that day. That's just because your heart was beating for the last 8 hours that you were asleep, right? So we're going to sample those. We're going to have that stuff going in and feeding that calorie expenditure. It's just going to have a different of weight as compared to something like, an active calorie burn, right? So if you go out and do, a 90-minute work where your heart rate's getting up there, you're lifting weight as well, there's going to be, any type of CrossFit workout where really that's a high calorie burn, right? But it's not going to be the highest just because it's not as cardiovascular intense, but that stuff is going to have a different weight to the actual calculation of total calories burned than the resting calories will. Just because resting calories being alive, right, those will accumulate throughout the day. The stuff where it starts to multiply and actually like see real calories burned comes from exercise.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's really, I like it because you kind of, as someone that also tracks their food, you can really kind of look at that balance of, hey, here's what I took in, here's what it's saying I burned, here's where my weight went the next day. It's really interesting. You like you said, you wake up and there's already a small day strain, and that's just because even sleeping, your body is requiring work to be done.
Correct. Yeah. And, I think let's talk about the strain score in general and the scale that it's on, right? So it's on a scale of 1 to 21 for, one primary reason, and that's because we worked off of the Borg scale of perceived exertion as we really started to get going. Now, what that stems from is a really basic premise of the idea that if I ask you, okay, how hard was that workout on a scale of 1 to 21? And you say, I don't know, 15, right? We could look back at your heart rate at that, and chances are your average heart rate is somewhere in the 150s, right? So basing on the premise of heart rate zone, right, that 1 to 21, what's really, really difficult to get into, 0 to 10 or 0 to 10 on our scale, I'd call that casual, right? Shorter workouts, typically with lower heart rates, that'll get you, a score of 0 to 10, right? 10 to 12, think about as, it's tough. You actually had to put a solid sweat into that kind of thing. 10 to or 12 to 14, 12 to 15, that's pretty tough. That's like, that was decent workout. I probably 45 minutes, probably felt like you had to lie on the ground for a little bit right after. 15 to 18, that's really tough stuff. That's like three-quarters of a day at the CrossFit Games, right, with those athletes. And then, the max part, 18 to 21, that means yourself out. That means you push yourself as hard as you can. This scale is really designed so that it can factor everything from, walking to running an Ironman, right? So it's a massive scale, and it's super personalized. So all of it's going to be based off of your heart rate, all of your specific activities, and in the way that your heart kind of functions throughout an exercise. So go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that's interesting because I did want to talk about the survey you get after you work out.
Mm-hmm.
There's typically 3 questions, and that first one is based off the Borg scale, which I didn't realize is a 1 to 21. Then there's also, your effort and did you finish the workout. Now,
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to most of the world, but not to CrossFitters.
Yeah.
I could give myself a 21 on a 3-minute workout.
Yep.
So, and that was the first time it really connected to me, where you're saying, hey, that strain should be relative to there. But I've become a big fan of Peloton. We got a Peloton bike during this quarantine. I've been using it a lot. But sometimes at 15-minute, like I'll do a hard one, trying to go max effort in that 15-minute. And I'm like, I'll give myself like a 15, 16 on my perceived exertion, when really the strain is only like a 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm. And so much of that is based on the duration of time, like.
So does that impact the ultimate strain score you get, or what's the purpose of that, I guess?
Of having the kind of like the survey at the end of it?
Yeah, exactly. And then I have another piece of feedback for your survey.
There's 2 pieces, right? Whoop does a ton of machine learning, right? Tons, right? The more time you spend using it, the more personalized it's going to get. Ultimately, the more accurate and more representative those scores will become, right? So there's something to be said about if you continue to fill these things out as saying, hey, look, this is like 16, like, dude, this is hard, right? But Whoop keeps giving me a 9 or a 10. Eventually, those things will start to normalize and they'll become closer, right? The main thing, one, as you start to get fitter, where hopefully we'd see, or as these workouts become easier to you, hopefully you would see a decline in both your perceived exertion, the subjective survey part that you fill in, as well as the actual score that comes back. Hopefully you'd see those 2 things come down together, right? That's step number 1. But 2 is like, if that doesn't happen, right, if they'll do a minute workout that beats the crap out of you, we're going to end up, and you're going to put in for something that we give you a 5, right? Eventually we'll start to realize, and that'll level out. Right. So there's a ton of machine learning happening, and those surveys, more than anything else, are designed for your feedback, your content. Right. So like if you say, all right, that was like 16, but I only got, I only got a 5. Right. More than anything, what it's trying to do is like, okay, so this was a really hard but really short workout. Your body still has capacity to keep going if you give it a little bit of a break. Right. Does that make sense?
And and it works backwards as well, because, for example, the walking, oftentimes I'll be like casual and it'll give me a 10.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but I suppose it's going to be the same answer. It's going to learn, hey, when you go extended periods, but your heart rate's not that high, the strain isn't as bad for your body as you.
And a lot of the calculation to begin with is done by the duration of time you spend in these max heart rate zones, right? So, even so, like if you were to do a short workout that gets you into your max heart rate zone for 5 minutes, we'll reward you for those 5 minutes, but it's not going to sustain over a long period of time. And the main thing to get after that is the heart rate recovery, right? To see how quickly your heart rate can kind of come back to normal effect, because that's a great indicator of physical fitness in general. And, more than anything will ultimately factor to how much work capacity you do have.
Well, and I will say I've noticed we've had our Peloton for right about a month, and I've noticed my heart rate doesn't get as high as quick as it used to, and I noticed my strain has slowly crept down on some of those classes. So,
And that's the other thing too, is that like we do, because it's all super personal, it's based off of your max heart rate, right? So what we'll see is that if your max heart rate does start to come down over time, like I know mine has in the past few years. I was at 206 for a little while. There's no way I'm getting at 206 right now. But that'll come down, and start to level out alongside those strain scores. So I'm now at the point where, 2 years ago, I would have had, let's say, I would have gotten like a 16 or the max heart rate of, 206 and playing, running around for 2 hours, right? After that, if I do the same workout now, my heart rate's not getting above 195, and, I'll still probably get the same strain score, even though I didn't hit that time, because my heart rate is now leveled out.
what's the highest strain score you've seen? Have you seen the 21?
I've never seen an exact 21. And that's because you'd have to be basically at a full sprint for a 24-hour period. You'd have to be awake the whole day. The entire time you're awake, you're sprinting.
You would think like after that ruck last year, whatever day that was on for the games athletes.
Dude, yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one. Believe it or not, at Wadapalooza, actually, the first workout, and we talked about this with Tommy Marchetti, the workout we had in the elite level, which was a ruck event. Basically, I can't remember how it started, but you ended up running off the competition floor and then coming back in and doing with a ruck on. I remember thinking to myself, like, that's got to be brutal. But it was a 45-minute workout, which is long for those. And I think we had an average strain score there of like 84 elite women. So it was
just
like,
for that workout.
Just for that 45 minutes.
And
yeah.
I'm sure they're doing more the rest of the day.
That was the first workout of the competition. So what ended up happening was so interesting.
No one's recovering.
Like, nobody recovered the rest of the weekend. So by the time we got to the end, it was literally just a battle of who had the highest pain threshold. It wasn't even like who's in the best shape. It was more just like, what are the workouts and who can take on the most pain right now. Because it rained that first night too. So it's like you're doing that 18.4 caliber workout on strain scale, but it's also pouring rain. It's also 85 degrees. The conditions aren't easy. Doing a muscle up on a bar that's been getting rained on outside, that's not easy, right? So just adding more to the overall, how much work you have to put into that. So by the end of the weekend, people were just totally shocked. And it was almost like the final workout was just like, who's gonna just push it through? Who's just gonna fight it out?
And even despite that, they didn't hit 21.
No 21s. The highest that I've seen a 20.9. I've seen tons of 20.7. I personally got my highest at a 20.8.
What'd you do for that?
I did it. Me and my brother, actually, we did 2 Tough Mudders back to back. So we had those, like, they're not like crazy hard, but we just did two of them back to back. And by the time we finished up with the whole thing, it had been like 8 hours of running up and down a mountain. So it was like just long enough that we beat the shit out of ourselves there. But I've seen, there are randomly too, you just find 4 or 5 works in a day, just like random. You can hang out of the gym all day, you can end up doing that. And that people can kind of rack those things up quickly. Some of the other ones are with, triathlons are going to put up really high strains. Sprint triathlons, even for a lot of people, will do that.
Right. It's long enough that you're building up that strain, but it's also hard enough that you're keeping your heart rate up super high.
Exactly. Yeah, your heart rate's staying up really high through the whole thing.
On the flip side, what's the lowest you've ever seen?
Believe it or not, the day after the Super Bowl is one of the lowest recovery days across all of Whoop, and it's also one of the lowest days across all of Whoop, right? So when you wake up, people are pissed off that they have to go to work. Who knows what they ate or drank the night before. They wake up, you go to work, you get pissed off, you don't exercise, or call out sick. We've seen stuff like that pop up on Twitter. The lowest cumulative strain score in a season I've ever seen is 2.1.
2.1 is like, I wake up with a 4. So that means.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah. It's just kind of, you stayed horizontal the whole day. Heart rate barely cracked 85. It's one of those things where you can blame it on what you want, but there's no other excuse for doing that.
Well, all right. So let's move on. But the one thing I want to talk about though, when it comes to strain, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but in my opinion, there's a really big gap between passable and strong.
Okay. I mean, keep going with it. Elaborate a little further.
Well, no, it's just, my wife and I talk
Give me an
about it.
example here. Yeah.
I mean, a great example would be you go for a walk, right? Like, to me, passable sounds like, I made it, right? But I also
Sure.
wouldn't classify a walk as strong. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel the same on every walk, whether I'm tired
Yep.
or not. Like, in my opinion, I mean, I assume all the higher ups are going to be downloading this episode. The CEO, the founder, they're all going to be listening to this. I'm just saying, hey, passable, good, strong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, survey features a great component, and more than anything, it's designed for our users to know and to be able to put in that subjective information. At the end of the day, the biggest piece is going to be the calculated strain score, right? So the difference between passable and strong in that survey, like,
Not
are you
important.
satisfied? It's not a huge facet and it's not a piece of the puzzle here. Um, I'd like to think that at some there will be a larger and kind of more robust strain survey, right? Just because workouts are going to become more and more tedious. If you think about the journal setup following recovery, we'd like to have something that does eventually for a work. What are some of these immediate things? What are some of the exercise modalities that you did? What movements working on? What type of workout were you doing? How would you classify it personally? So that way there's just a little bit more depth to it. But then the difference between pass strong, yeah, no, like you sliding across from 3 and then it hits 4 and it goes strong, because I have that huge gap where most workouts live it was better than passable, but it definitely wasn't strong. That's probably where most of my stuff ends up being anyway.
Yeah, and
You're
it
on
is
to something. That's good
it is
feedback. You're onto something.
good, and it's quite a big slide. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's increments that I'm not aware of in there, but it reminds me of I think it's Tim Ferriss that's like, hey, you have to rate something 1 to 10, but you can't use a 7, right? And it's kind of like you're making me
Yeah,
decide,
yeah.
is this passable or was it strong? And
Mm-hmm.
if I don't feel it was strong, I'll just denote it as passable. But anyway, that's just my feedback. Send it to the president. So if you go to the next screen on recovery,
He'll get a text in 15 minutes. Yeah.
so you have your recovery screen, obviously. So here's a big question, and you mentioned you got your elusive 7 days of green.
There you
I'd
go.
probably have had a handful of days in the red, but they're mostly in the yellow and green. So
Mm-hmm.
let me have you do this. This is probably, everybody understands resting heart rate. It's just when you're chilled out, what's your heart rate go to during sleep? Probably, what is it average?
Yep.
So mine's, typically in the mid 40s or so. It's decent. How would you explain heart rate variable to a fifth grader?
Heart rate variability to a fifth grader. Well, I tell them like, hey, look, dude, you're not going to need to worry about this in a while. But no, variability. It's the time your heart doesn't beat a consistent pace, right? So 60 beats per minute doesn't translate to 1 beat per second. Like the heartbeat. It doesn't. There's no consistency. So the time, those intervals between each of your heart is different, right? And what the difference in time, that variation, is driven by competition between two halves of your nervous system. So you have one half of your nervous system, your parasympathetic, which is trying to raise your heart rate, right? So as it's trying to raise your heart rate and send your body into that kind of fight or flight stage where, if you're walking up to a squat rack, your whole body's going to be run by your parasympathetic nervous system, right? And then the other half of it is trying to lower your heart rate, right? So as those two things compete to raise your heart, those intervals end up changing between of your heart, right? So what that's telling you is basically the balance you have between your two nervous systems. The more balance you have, more ability to adapt your body has, right? So if you go, do that heavy squat and you can kind of jump back and relax, your body's going to have more ability to go do it again if it needed to, right? Being able to shift states allows you both mentally and physically to adapt in a better and more efficient way, essentially. Takes less stress in your body to kind of come back down, right? Takes less stress in your body to get back up, right? Your brain can kind of alter between those states and ultimately make, I don't want to say better decision based on it, but if you're kind of one polar end or the other, you're either going to be stuck in a kind of a total digestive and rest state, right? Where that working out sucks. That's when you have to go do anything. That's when you feel super lazy, when your brain is just kind of like, right? And just operating quickly. Versus the other side of it, where you're stuck in the drive state, which is, most people are stuck in this state. People in our circles, right? Where people are overworking themselves, trying to do too much, taking on more. That's where things like, stress, anxiety, that's where those things come into play, right? So if you those two things, right? If you can balance the haves of your system and figure out what brings you back to kind of that equilibrium state, HR is going to skyrocket. It's going to go through the roof. It's going to get higher and higher and higher. So starting with, a level of physical fitness, which, typically has a lower resting heart rate, right? Then the other things that play in there, like stress, like diet, like all the different aspects of training that we do, and most importantly, sleep, allow your body to regenerate itself and ultimately allow you to have a higher HRV. So what is HRV to a fifth grader? HRV is the best and most indicative kind of representative metric we can look at to give you a glimpse at your whole lifestyle. That's everything training, that's everything stress, that's everything emotional, all of that stuff. How well is your body responding to do day to day?
Okay, now explain it to a kindergartner. Just kidding. Just kidding. I got it.
That number says you're good or bad.
That's a great explanation. So mine right now, for example, says 79. Where would you say that falls?
It's great.
It's not great. I mean, I'm on some
thing
teams
about
in
HRV,
here. We have the
and they're going
Thunderbird
to be
team.
liars. Yeah, going to be
But
the HRVs.
They can't lie about it, right? It's pulling up data.
Nope. That's the best part about Whoop is that it's the ultimate accountability tool. Your heart doesn't lie, right? It's unfair to compare yourself, right? It's like apples to oranges. There's tons of different genetic factors that go into things. If you think about a spectrum of physiology, right, where every person is on there in some people are more power athletes, some people are more endurance based, right? Where you kind of think that's going to dictate a little bit about what your body's going to do from a physiological perspective. And heart rate really kind of falls into that. So there's that aspect. Age is another factor into it. Gender is another factor into it. Height, weight, they're all factors. Right? So it's really more like apples to oranges than just anything, right? So my HRV is actually in a similar spot to yours. My heart rate's in the high 40s, low 50s, and my HRV is somewhere between baseline is 70 and 80, right? Somewhere between there. I can fluctuate though, really low or really high, right? Like my brother's bachelor party was last year, and I've never seen an HRV score in the 20s except for after that weekend, right? I was like, oh my God, this is really bad for me, right? And then there are other things, right, where if I go through, training for something actually specifically, not just to be healthy and to live a better life, right? If you train for something, you really get ready and you dial in everything. HRV is 145. So there's it can range in various spots, and that's so figure out what this perfect recipe is for you. Knowing what makes your body tick, both in bad ways. That's really the key to all of this.
Yeah, and I can see the days I wasn't recovered last week, it was as low as 60, where yesterday, for example, it hit 100. So you can definitely, or 98, I should say. Yeah, so obviously I was a little more recovered there. And then because of, Sunday was my rest day, I did just a little light walking and yoga maybe. And then my recovery shot up, my HRV shot up. And then because of that, I went a little harder and now went a little bit further down. So I would expect today, depending on how hard I go, now I know where that HRV should go.
Exactly.
So go ahead.
Have you noticed any specific activities or, recovery modes that really do impact HRV positively or negatively for that matter?
I wouldn't say I know. I haven't noticed what impacts it negatively, but I noticed that the days when it goes higher are the days where obviously I wouldn't say I take rest days. I'm always out walk. I
Sure.
would have said I'm taking rest days, but I realized that going for a 10-mile walk is not rest, right? Based on this.
Sure.
But I definitely, I wouldn't say I've realized what activities are impacting it. More so, I just realized, hey, when I'm being smarter about how much I'm doing, I'm noticing the difference there. And I'm sure
Yeah,
there's a
for
little,
sure.
I'll tell you
That's the
what,
crux.
I'll tell you, like Saturday, UFC came back on, and I was literally on my couch for 8 hours just watching
Yeah, there
UFC
you go. There
and
you
chilling out.
go.
And then and I noticed my recovery starting to go back up. And I think that was a big part of it. I worked out that
100%.
day too, but I noticed my recovery started to creep up. I think just because I chilled out.
Yeah. So I've noticed. I mean, and the reason I ask is because so many people I talk to tend to have, the one or two kind of their day, right? For me, it's yoga, it's timing of food. Those are the two things. I'm convinced that there's a correlation between digestion, or health of your digestive tract, and HRV. I don't know. I have no information that's grounded in that other than personal experience and just some anecdotal comments from other people. Um, but I know that when I do a solid, hour of, mobility work, actually stretching, breathing practice, something like that, it absolutely changes the way that my HRV shows up. And I don't know if that's because it needs the physical work there, or because it's more the breathing aspect or the stress relief might be. I know that makes an impact. And then the other part is, right, like I've been able to, and I think a big reason I have the 7-day green streak is because I'm able to change my schedule a little bit. Now that we've been home for so long, and kind of stuck and confined with, no, this is the longest I've gone without traveling in a long time. Two, I'm not commuting to and from, my office, the gym, wherever it is that I'm going that day, right? So I'm at home, right? And I'm able to I can sit down and I can have dinner at 6 o'clock at night and then go to bed before 11. And it still has that 3 or 3.5 hour window that I'm trying to give myself between, eating my last meal and going to bed, right? Allowing digestion to happen, right? So I feel like those are the two things that have really helped me out, right? So just knowing timing of food for me is a big one. And then finding some way to add in either a yoga or meditation there has been able to kind of juice for me.
Well, no, that's interesting, and I'm definitely going to pay more attention. I feel after this call with you, I've been using the Whoop more on a surface level. It's
Mm-hmm.
helping, but I think now that what you're telling me, and for all the listeners also, is you can really dive deep into a lot of this stuff and
Dude.
figure out more specific to you what impacts you. Like I do a meditation and a breathing practice, but I don't always um, track it as an
Think about how they
activity.
impact you. Yeah, for sure.
Right. But now I can go back and look at something like, hey, my resting, my HRV is improved. Let's go see what activities I did those days and let's see what
Mm-hmm.
that looked like. Um, let's go. We have a few more minutes. Let's go to the last screen, which is just your sleep performance. This is something that's drastically improved for me during the
Yep.
quarantine. I mean, I'm
Yep.
typically at 90 to 100%, which is just your hours of sleep relative. I'm sure it's just a percentage of the hours that you're saying
Yep.
we need and how much you're actually getting.
Exactly. Right. So it's a combination of your baseline. Me, I have a baseline of 7 hours and 48 minutes. I need to get every single night. That's a function of my height, age, weight, gender, athletic history, all those things. And then we add in the current strain that you have, right? So how many more minutes of sleep do you need to get tonight based on the amount of strain your body took on yesterday, as well as sleep debt, right? So sleep is negatively cumulative, meaning you can quickly rack up a sleep debt, but you can't get it all back in one night, right? You have to sleep consistently in order to kind of erase that debt. And you have to get the same amount or get the right amount every single night, right? So sleep performance is a function of, yeah, exactly what you said. What is the percentage of sleep you got versus what you actually needed on that given night?
Where
And
does it?
that's
Where can I see where my baseline is?
so if you're in the app, right, and you're on that sleep pillar, I'll pull it up for you here. Right. There's my elusive green week. Right. So if you're in the, look at me,
Did you
10 hours,
screenshot
20
that,
minutes.
by the way?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Sent it to the company. I got to brag on the back. But right. So I got 9 and 22 last night.
Look at
I
you,
made it. That's a
sleeping all night.
concerted effort. I'm getting in bed at 9:30 and I'm not leaving until the next morning, right? So that was it. You tap on that sleep need, right? So I need 7:44. That's my baseline,
Okay, so
right?
mine's
I only have a
7:30. I've not seen that before. Okay.
Yep. Right. So then I had super light workout, just a yoga day yesterday. So I only need 10 more minutes to add to it. My sleep debt's only at 30 minutes. So that's pretty good. And then I didn't take any naps or anything like that. So I had no reason to lose some of that sleep need.
So you can make up for some of that debt and I know there's an activity of napping. I assume it will, if your heart rate drops significantly, it'll assume it's napping or sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, more so than just heart rate, right? Like we'll factor in basically when you fall asleep, brief rise in skin temperature. There's a bottom of your heart rate and a surge in sympathetic activity, right? So we can tell when things happen. We know exactly that you're asleep, right? So anytime you do fall asleep, we will be able to pick as long as it's longer than 20 minutes.
Dude, this has been super helpful. One other question I have is just similar to what you just told me. Hey, if you touch that button there on the sleep needed, I can see something. I would kind of refer to those as like an Easter egg. You know that expression?
Yeah.
What are some other Easter eggs within the Whoop app that those listening may not even realize? For example, I've realized if you turn your phone sideways, you basically see your heart rate
This
jump up
is
and down throughout the day.
it's funny. I mean, it's tougher. I think it's tougher for me to answer this because I've been playing with this app for 4 years now, right? Like I've been watching it change. So I know we'll start with this. Every single thing in this app is clickable, right? Every little button in there, like you could click on just about anything. That, for example, I could click on. I could click on, each box, each ticker box at the bottom. Every single one of these things, they're all available to click on. Everything is, right? Two things I would point out. Number one, within that drop down menu in the top left corner, you have your sleep and your strain coach. The sleep coach is one of the most useful things that we have, right? So this will start, right? This will bring you to this page. So it shows you your baseline, basically say, okay, it suggests bed based on your sleeping habits. That's what you really need to get, right? So this is the time you need to go into bed based on you want to wake up, how much your body needs to get. So along with how you sleep, how much sleep to get, factor in, and I want to peak, right? I want to be 100% sleep, perform and get by options, which you can actually just see by you swipe that page across and you can kind of set your, right? So that for me, I need to get 100% of my sleep Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to make sure my is good. It's going to be harder for me to get all my sleep on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, right? And typically, that Sunday is going to be my worst night for whatever reason. I'm in my mid-20s. There you go. So you have this in here, which is basically planning out how much your sleep needed.
That's
It's a good
cool.
one.
That's
Yeah, and I
very
think the other
helpful.
one is this coach, right? So this is your strain coach here, right? It's right above the same thing in that top corner. You can go
Yep.
here, strain coach right below it.
That's how I get
This
to
one right
typically
here.
whenever I track my activity. Man, your heart rate's at
Exactly.
84. Am I stressing you out? Are we good? I'm only at
I'm
55. I'm enjoying this.
I'm telling you, this is the walking, this is the thinking. You walk, you get going, you get your talking and thinking about it. You can get this thing up really quickly without even realizing, right? So that strain coach feature up, having that optimal window to kind of look. I know I've been sleeping well, so let's today. What's it going to take for me to get to 16 strain today? That's the kind of thing that we're looking at.
So you
So
adjusted,
more
you
than
changed that on your own.
yes,
Well, don't
yeah.
worry.
So
My
I'd
wife,
say
my
those are
wife wants to know all the questions now. I'll fill you in after. Don't worry. We compete. We compete for strain and recovery in this household.
I love that. Right. There's that. And then, the last kind of cool thing, if you have a C2 or an erg at your house, this heart broadcast feature, if you want to see your heart rate on the actual Concept 2 rower or bike, you
Can
can
I
do
do
that.
that on the Peloton?
Yeah, I think so. As long as it takes
Oh,
Bluetooth, as long as it takes a Bluetooth
that's
connection.
interesting because I always keep my phone in the water bottle holder so I can see it, but it'd be nice to have it on there.
So
Take
yeah,
a step back with me before we go there. Go back to your strain coach.
yep.
It's if you adjust that W to, it's telling you what's optimal. Why would you adjust that higher?
If you want to, there's an there's an optimal range right there. So when you have higher recovery, that range is wider, that range is bigger. So if you want to max out and say, I want to go push as far as I possibly can today, you can adjust it to the top point and set that as your goal. And it'll be really difficult to get that high in one exercise, right? Just like if you can see that number, it'll be really difficult to get that
Yeah,
strength
like
score all
so
the way
for
up there.
me, I'm on the edge of it doesn't switch to overreaching till 15.5. I'm still at but that's really
Yeah,
just setting a goal. It's not necessarily doing anything else. It's just when you go back to your other screen, you can challenge
think
yourself to
about it.
get there.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it this way, right? You know how we were talking earlier about, not feeling as good as your strain score might recommend, or the other way around, right? If you feel better than, your 30% recovery, you say like, well, man, hey, look, I really think I got more in the tank than 30%. Go to the strain coach, look at the optimal range, and set it to the very top of that optimal range.
And
That's how I would do that, right?
I
Because then
like,
you
I
can
mean,
actually say, all right, I'll push as hard as I can, right? This will be the very furthest edge I can go on the strain score, but I'm not overdoing it too much, right? Whereas if you were to set it, into that way overreaching spot and you go get a 17 strain on a 30% recovery, your body's going to hurt real bad tomorrow.
gotcha. I mean, and again, it's just kind of setting goals, but you can still push yourself into that strain without adjusting that. But it's nice to kind of
Totally.
challenge yourself. And where was
I
that broadcast? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you going to add
The
something?
biggest thing about strain score for me as a strain coach, I've just learned that I have way more work capacity sometimes than I thought. Like especially doing at home, I have a dumbbells here and that's about all I'm working with. So, to try and find out movements I can do that keep my heart rate up and to look at that thing as I get to the end of we'll call it like, you do a 4x4 sets of something, right? And you get to the end of that and you're like, I have so more room to work here. It's a little bit motivating and almost kind of like a kick in the ass to be like, get back in there and go do more because your body can handle it, right? So I feel like it's been an invaluable tool for me these last 8 weeks, just because I've had something to kind of keep me accountable, or I'm kind of getting away with doing what's on the paper for workouts. It's more like we can do more than this. We can take on more stuff. Let's go. All right, we finished. Fine. Let's go run 2 miles at the end of this, right? Let's just add that in here just so we can get more strain up here.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I want to ask you one more question, but the most common question I get is, "Hey, is it worth $30?" And I'm like, it depends how accountable you are to yourself, because that's
That's
the
the
type of
game.
stuff that keeps you accountable. I mean, I would probably be 50 pounds heavier right now without the Whoop. Like this
I
has
love
been.
that.
I mean, the
I
Peloton's
think.
been helpful as well. Don't get me wrong, but I wake up, I don't keep my phone in the bedroom. I keep it out here. But the first thing
Mm-hmm.
I do is I come out into the kitchen or living room, and I check my sleep, how I did, and I think about the rest of my day. I start thinking about what activities do I want to do? Should I take a moderate day? Should I, go
Mm-hmm.
for a walk? So I think that's
I
great. And
mean,
I mean, I've only scratched the surface.
I think the short answer, yes. Like for less dollar a day to know two things. Like you're asking the wrong person this question because I'm going to have a lot of opinion on it, right? Um, the first one, right? Like there's no product that works as hard for you at all seconds of the day as Whoop does. No product, not one. Like maybe if some on, there's no product that works as hard as this thing does for you for all 24 hours of the day. The second thing I think about is like, you know, I actually do. I mean, I have my own Whoop subscription, right? Paying for that kind of thing. Just get rid of pre-workout for a month and tell me if you think Whoop is more valuable than the pre-workout, right? Like just try something like that, right? If you spend $3 a day on pre-workout, that's right there. That's 10 days. That's it, right? This thing is way more valuable, in my opinion, than anything like that. Many different things
Well,
you could substitute out.
you know, here's what it comes down to. And this is, if you want to get me in touch with the president, I can have this conversation directly with him.
Sure,
But
sure,
people inevitably want what they perceive as easier. And
totally.
it's easier to throw a scoop of pre-workout and think you're about to crush a workout than take a long, hard look at your body and saying, hey, it's actually dumb for me to go hard today. I need to do this or I need to do that. Or a 5K comes up at your box and it's the last thing you want to do, but you're fully recovered. Well, guess what? You got to push
Do
yourself
it.
today.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I know exactly what I'm going to do today because of that recovery. I've got to run out, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to hit a 45-minute Peloton class. I'm going to try because of this to hit my strain in one activity, and that's
Hmm.
kind of my little goal because of this, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't have this staring at me.
There's something to be said about having a growth mindset with Whoop, right? There's no magic to it, right? So just putting it on your wrist isn't going to make you fitter. It's not going to make you live a longer life. What you actually have to do is use the information that's coming off of it, whether it's positive or negative, and action that. You have to be willing to make change, because that's the big component of all of this stuff. When you find a wearable, you don't want to build it so that you're giving information and high fives for what they did today. We're not going to set an arbitrary 10,000 steps goal. We're not going to give you that, because there's no point, right? Congratulations, you got 10,000 steps. What does that actually do for you? How did that actually change? How did that change the way you think about sleep? Did that make you diet? No. What that actually did is it gave you the satisfaction of, hey, nice job, right? What you should get the satisfaction from is going through an entire month-long stretch and seeing the way that your body changes, seeing that you feel every single day, knowing that you're getting all the sleep your body needs, knowing that you're exercising and training in the smart way. Because what you're going to look back on 50 years from there isn't the 10,000 steps you got on Tuesday, October 22nd. What it's going to be is the six or 8 long months you decided to change the way that you live. And a lot of that stems from having a backbone of data that can tell you what to do.
I love it. I love it. Can you do me one favor and show me again that heart rate broadcast?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, we got off topic there. Yeah. So if you're in, this is the strap settings page, right? You scroll down on the bottom here, you hit strap settings. There's a little toggle that says on or off right there. If you hit on, this thing will turn blue, right? And now it's for a Bluetooth connection. You go on your Peloton and you say connect a Bluetooth device, Whoop will pop up. And you'll be able to connect it. And from there, your actual run device here will stream right to your erg, your Peloton, whatever.
Well, I'm very relaxed because my heart rate's only 47 right now. I'm basically asleep.
I've been talking a lot,
So that was super. I mean, speaking for myself, that was very helpful. I'm going to share this with, we have a
Good, I'm glad.
Thunderbro team out there. I'm on another quarantine team with
There you
some
go.
friends of mine. So it's really interesting. When are we going to have the lifetime option for the Whoop?
I mean, hey, you do right now. It's called keep using it. Like in terms of buying the product, we're probably not going to go that way. When we first started as a company, we were a one-time $500 product. And for the most part, that's a tough pill to swallow. I don't think the value of Whoop is really in this hardware that you pay $500 for, right? The value is the information that you're getting from it every single day, right? So, time we lower barrier of entry, every time we changed it 500 to 375 on a flash sale or whatever it was, this is in 2016 too. More people got on, and when more people get on, and more people stay on, from that, that's really one of the big learnings we had. So it was like, why would we try to sell the hardware at 500 if we can get people to start, use that first 6 months as a trial, and if they really, that price would be justified, right? So like that's the short answer on that is we changed our business model to get more people using our product. And so far it's really paid off.
Well, yeah, you've created, someone who went into this as, I wouldn't say skeptical, but I was like, let me see. I've tried other ones, never was as consistent as I am now. And you've got someone that now I will do this forever because it's very valuable. So I appreciate it.
To hear that, man, that's satisfying. Seeing the development we've had over the last few years, and knowing that our team just got bigger to really bring a whole lot more view. Our product roadmap is no short of a couple miles long, so we have our work cut out for us for the next few years, but it'll all be really, really worth it. And I think people will see the value and the explanation that comes along with wearing a Whoop strap.
Yeah, and just have your president, add that little good in between passable and strong, and and I'll be happy. So
Easy. That text is
what's
going
a,
out as soon as we hang out.
what's the best way to wear this thing when I'm competing in jiu-jitsu? You have wrestling as an activity. I assume that's a
Yep.
broad kind of scope. And we have a
We have,
jiu-jitsu team as well that's wearing the Whoop right now.
that's awesome. That's the coolest part, seeing how different, every athlete trains, right? So we've gotten to learn the nuances of skeleton, right? Which is, going an hour face ice, right? We've gotten to learn the nuances of different track and field events, of CrossFit, basketball, all the training sides of every single sport you can think of. That's the coolest part. And so having a jiu-jitsu team on, more we can check, and that's why we have all these. But to answer the question, we have, number one, arm sleeve was designed for combat and contact sports in particular. So that's a little pad. You can literally take the sensor off this pad and you can wear them on the inside. Right now you can wear that strap you have anywhere on your arm. We validated every single spot. So data will be still accurate. We can trust that. The next step for us, one of the things we're actively working on now, is we've kind of always viewed Whoop as a product that can be worn anywhere on the body. We don't want to limit it to being, occupy real estate on your wrist. So I think what you'll see in the next, calendar year is a lot of development on, figuring out where else we can put this hardware in the form of soft goods. So things like, are we going to build something that goes around for we'll think about combat sports. How do you guys actually get to use Whoop? How can you wear it? What makes it more efficient, right? So that's something that we have to figure out. But right now we have the impact sleeve, which is literally designed for martial arts and different combat sports. So I'd recommend doing that. But second, try this yourself. I don't know. I can't tell you that the data will be perfect, but if you wear compression, take the sensor itself, take this piece out and just kind of pop it, slide it in somewhere else and see if it picks data that you're really looking for. I can't say that it's going to be perfect in terms of data quality, but I want to try something out, different use case. I'm more than welcome to do that.
All right, I'll give that a go. Well, for me, I just wear a long sleeve rash guard and basically leave it there and, hope for the best.
So I do the same thing every time I get into a pickup basketball game or anything. I'm going to be, rubbing shoulders with somebody else. And I try to find ways to kind of cover it up. I'll use tape and pre-wrap every now and then as well.
Yeah, I can think of one spot, but it's too big. It's too big for me. Too big for me. Tell the president to come up with a very, very small wrist wrap.
Yeah, that's next. That's next. Yeah.
So, well,
Priorities are
AJ,
different.
this this has been super helpful, and I hope for those listening it was helpful as well to go through and really just understand everything, because I think for so many people the data is extensive and we didn't even realize what we can really find out. So thanks for spending the time and going through it.
100%. Appreciate you, Jason.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends.
on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day, and thanks again to our special guest. We appreciate all you guys do for us with Best Hour of Their Day when it comes to sharing our posts on Instagram, when it comes to subscribing to us on YouTube, when it comes to the constant feedback. We are grateful and we appreciate it. We are trying to build a community based on coaching development and becoming the best version of yourself. And it goes without saying that we couldn't do without all of you. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Season 1 of Dropping In is out. We are getting tremendous feedback and we'd love for you to check it out. Leave us a comment on there. Head over to our Instagram. Give us a follow. Like our pictures. Feel free to share anything that resonates with you. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or feedback for us, please don't hesitate. Email us, besthouroftheirday@gmail.com. Thanks again. Until the next episode, we hope you've had the best hour of your day.